Oh my goodness, this room is just crawling with men. Irene, honey, congratulations. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 54 of Movies Are Awesome, the show all about carpentry. My name is Nathan Pottle, and thank you for joining me today. It's another day of just staying inside and washing my hands and staying safe and not going anywhere unless I absolutely need to. And hopefully that's what everyone else is doing as well, just so that we can get back to our normal lives as soon as possible. I really like being inside my house. I enjoy staying inside, but not all the time. So I'm hoping that we get to a point where we're allowed to get back out and do things again. But while we're stuck inside, why don't we continue on? This episode today is going to be part 2 of my must-watch movie list. I'm very excited. Last time we did numbers 1 to 25. Today we're doing number 26 to 50. It's going to take us from the 1960s all the way into the mid-1980s. I'm excited to talk about some of these movies today. Why don't I not waste time? Why don't I just get started here? So number 26 is from 1962, Lawrence of Arabia. Now this movie is long and it's epic and it's really just quite a fantastic movie. I have to say, it has been some time since I've seen it, and I often equate Lawrence of Arabia to Ben-Hur. Like, in my mind, those movies are just inexplicably linked. So, if you like Ben-Hur, odds are you're probably going to like Lawrence of Arabia too. It's another one of those movies that has just cemented itself into film history. It's really important, and it's really good. It's also one of those ones that I don't want to really talk about the plot too much, just like go into it and experience this movie, as I feel that that's just how you're going to get the most out of a movie like this. So, Lawrence of Arabia. I also want to take a moment to mention the cinematography in this movie. If you're not familiar with certain compositions and how camera shots are set up, there's something called the rule of thirds, and that's when you divide the screen into 3 equal pieces, and you have your subject matter on one of those lines dividing your 3 parts. And that's what this movie does in every single shot. This movie just went to great lengths to make the cinematography as strong as it could be. This movie looks incredible. All of the shots are just absolutely on point. So number 26, Lawrence of Arabia, you should check it out. The next one is also from 1962. Number 27 on the list is To Kill a Mockingbird. Now, maybe you've read the book before. I've read the book and I've seen the movie. They are both really good. It's one of those ones that I don't even know what to say. It's about racism in the South. The main character's father is a lawyer, and it's about like him taking on this court case. And the main character is also dealing with like things growing up. Like it's a coming of age story / racism is bad story. I find it really, really good. Who is it in this movie? Gregory Peck is the actor's name, who plays, oh my goodness, what's the main character's name here in To Kill a Mockingbird? Let me look it up. Let's find out. It's going to bother me if I don't. And my wife loves To Kill a Mockingbird a whole lot, so if I do not get the main character, she's probably listening to this episode right now screaming at me that I don't have it. Gregory Peck plays Atticus Finch. That's his name. Oh my goodness. But in any case, To Kill a Mockingbird is a really strong film with really strong performances, and it's just telling a good story. So at its heart, To Kill a Mockingbird is exactly what it needs to be to make its way on to this list. I'll move on though. This next one is a weird one. So number 28, it's from 1964. It's a movie called Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Now, this movie is a little out there. It's a comedy and it's directed by Stanley Kubrick. Now, if you're familiar with Stanley Kubrick as our director, his movies are often like thought pieces to make you think about things, and Dr. Strangelove is no exception. It is funny. I laughed throughout the film, but it's like there are just some strange things happening in this movie. So even though I don't absolutely love this movie, I feel like it needs to be on this list. And there are other Stanley Kubrick movies on this list as well. This is just the first one. We haven't gotten to the other ones that made it onto this list. However, this movie is unique. It's in black and white. I don't even know what to say what this movie's about. Like there's an impending war going on, and this large room of military men and like political leaders are trying to figure out like what's going on. Does this nuclear bomb need to drop, or do they need to call it back, or can they call it back? And there's a whole thing going on, but at the same time it's very funny and quirky, and I think it's a movie that you need to see and understand, because there are a lot of things in this movie that get referenced in pop culture and things like that. So I feel that Doctor Strangelove is a movie that you should check out. So go ahead and do it. Go check it out. Doctor Strangelove, or How I Stopped Worrying and Learned to Love the Bomb, something like that. It's one of those ones that has two titles, and the second title is really long and obscure. There are a few movies like that out there. I'll move on to the next one, though. It's also from 1964. 1964 actually has 3 movies representing it, so that was a good year. But the next one that I have to talk about is a little movie. You may have heard of it. It's called Mary Poppins. Now, Mary Poppins is, of course, a huge Disney title. It's big, it's exciting, it's got animated characters and live action characters on the screen together. They went through a lot of trials and tribulations to get this movie made. If you want, after watching Mary Poppins, go check out Saving Mr. Banks, which is about the making of this movie, and I find it absolutely fascinating. I think I have said on the show before, I actually enjoy Saving Mr. Banks more than Mary Poppins, but as a piece of film history, Mary Poppins is a more important movie than Saving Mr. Banks. Of course, you have Julie Andrews as Mary Poppins, you have Dick Van Dyke as Bert, and the songs that they sing, this movie has so much going for it. It's like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. It has Jolly Holiday, it has Chim Chimney. There's so much good stuff going on in this movie. There's some stuff that I don't like about it, and I feel that Mary Poppins is maybe a little bit long. Like, it's almost 2.5 hours long, and I feel like that's just a little bit too much. A couple of sequences could definitely be cut out. They don't need to be in there, like when they're floating in the air because they love to laugh. I don't love it. I don't think it's amazing. So Mary Poppins, it's important for film as a whole and for Disney kind of getting back in the game. I do believe this came out about a year before Walt Disney died, so kind of did that. I think this is the movie that also got Julie Andrews on the map. I think she was in Broadway or like on stage performances, and then she was brought on to be Mary Poppins, and then she appears on this list in a couple more movies here. So I'll get there. But my next one, number 30, also from 1964, won Best Picture that year, and that is, of course, My Fair Lady, starring Audrey Hepburn, who is just fantastic and amazing. And who doesn't love Audrey Hepburn? I don't know anybody who doesn't love Audrey Hepburn, because she's just so charming and sweet and delightful. This is also one of those movies that it's been a while since I've seen it. I've got it in my collection, just haven't popped it in a while. This movie's also a musical, and I just really enjoy this movie. It's highly entertaining, a really good story, great performances, especially from Audrey Hepburn. The sad thing about this movie is that her voice was replaced by a different actress's singing voice, and I didn't know this before. This is one of the things that my wife has told me, so she knows things. But in any case, they had swapped out her voice with a different actress, and I do not know the name of the woman, but she's in The Sound of Music, I know that. But they used her voice instead of Audrey Hepburn's singing voice because they wanted a voice that was either lower or higher. I think they wanted a higher voice than Audrey Hepburn's. And when the movie came out and Audrey Hepburn saw it, she was shocked that they had replaced her voice because they didn't tell her, I guess, that this was going to happen. And she had said in an interview afterwards. Like, if she had known that they were going to do that, she would never have done the movie, which is unfortunate because it's a really good movie. So even though there's kind of like that black stain on it, please go check it out anyway. My Fair Lady is a really, really good movie. I'll just keep moving on though. So we had Julie Andrews in Mary Poppins, and of course, Julie Andrews is in Number 31, which came out in 1965, and that is The Sound of Music. This is also like an epic musical. Like, it's really long. So long. Let me look up how long. It's got to be over 3 hours, I'm pretty sure. If it's not over 3 hours, I would be very surprised. It at least feels that long. Okay, so 2 hours and 52 minutes, so it's almost 3 hours, but it definitely, you feel that length. It if you watched it on VHS growing up as a kid like I did, it was on 2 VHS tapes for The Sound of Music, and you pop it in and you watch it. This movie also, it just has so much. Obviously, it's based off a true story. The Von Trapp family was a real family living during World War II, and there's all these things going on with like the Nazi party, and then Maria trying to be a good nanny or whatever to the kids, and they're all singing songs and they're making clothes out of drapes, and it's just it is a delightful film. I enjoy it quite a bit. It's one of those ones though that I need to be in the mood to watch Sound of Music. I can't just sit down and pop it in. And actually I feel that way about a lot of these movies. You can't just watch them. You have to, like, okay, I'm feeling Sound of Music. So watch it while you're feeling it, because maybe that feeling doesn't come along for you all that often. For me, it doesn't. It is a very good movie, though, and Julie Andrews is a delight. This movie also stars Christopher Plummer, who I have always said is a Canadian treasure. If you're not familiar with Christopher Plummer, the movie he was most recently in was Knives Out, and Knives Out is so good. I don't want to let myself get too distracted, though, so I'm not going to talk about how great Knives Out is, but The Sound of Music is very good, and it has Christopher Plummer, and it has Julie Andrews, and you should check it out. This next one is kind of interesting. Number 32 on the list came out in 1966, and that is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Now, what's interesting about this movie is it was directed by Sergio Leone, or is it Leone? I hear it pronounced both ways. I have no idea. But Sergio Leone, he directed this movie, and he's Italian, and he directed this movie and a bunch of his other famous westerns. They take place in the US, but he filmed them in Italy because he's an Italian filmmaker. Now, what's really interesting about this movie, and it kind of bothers me when watching this movie, but it also kind of fits the style of what's going on in this movie, that everyone filmed their lines in like the native language that they spoke, and then they dubbed it all over for everyone to be speaking English. So Clint Eastwood is obviously in this movie. This is the start of Clint Eastwood being like a big star. I think he was in other stuff before this, but I'm pretty sure The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was the start of westerns being like the biggest thing, and westerns all over the place. But you had Clint Eastwood doing his lines in English and other characters doing their lines in Spanish or Italian or whatever language they happened to speak, and then they just dubbed it over with other people. So while you're watching the movie, how some characters' lips are moving and the words that are coming out do not match, and it's a little bit infuriating to watch a movie this way. But when you know that this is how the movie was made and you go into it knowing that it's going to look like this, I don't think it's going to be a huge detriment. This is a good story and it's an engaging movie to watch. I like the way that it's shot and I like the way that it's performed. And of course, I love the music, which is composed by Ennio Morricone, who is an Italian composer. He's very, very talented. He has done a lot of very famous scores. Like if you heard his Western music, like you would recognize it because it's very famous. It's been used in a bunch of places. Just as a side note on Ennio Morricone, though, he came out of retirement in 2015 to do a little movie called The Hateful Eight. Now, I love The Hateful Eight, and I really love the score. and he won the Academy Award that year for Best Original Score for The Hateful Eight. And Ennio was up against John Williams because John Williams had come out of retirement to do The Force Awakens, and Ennio Morricone had come out of retirement to do The Hateful Eight. So all of the other scores that year were just like not even acknowledged, and it was basically, are they going to give it to John Williams, or are they going to give it to Ennio? And they gave it to Ennio, and his acceptance speech was just the sweetest thing. I highly recommend looking it up online on YouTube or wherever and just watching his acceptance speech from 2015. Well, he would have accepted it in 2016, but 2015 is when the movie came out. But it's just such a sweet speech, and he's a little old man, and it just warms my heart. That is probably my favorite Oscar acceptance speech of all time. So check that out after you're done watching The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. The next one that I have here, number 33. Now, on the last episode, I had said that I don't really even like all of these movies that are on the list, but I feel that they're all important towards the film industry and just the influence that these movies have created. Now, this next movie, I actually don't like that much. It's out there. It's kind of crazy. It's weird. I'm not super into it. It's another Stanley Kubrick movie. It came out in 1968, and it's called 2001: A Space Odyssey. And this movie is, I don't even know what this movie's about. It kind of takes you through the journey of mankind. In a sense, you have like cavemen at the beginning, and then you have guys like flying through space on their spaceship, and they go to war with the artificial intelligence, and then there's like a baby floating in the sky and a guy in a weird apartment. I have no idea. There are probably people out there who are a lot smarter than me who understand this movie and think it's just absolutely brilliant. I think visually the movie is spectacular. From a story perspective, though, I have no idea. I don't get it. And that's fine. When it comes to movies that are like this, not everybody needs to get it. Not everybody needs to like it. It's definitely not a movie that's for everybody. But I feel it's like, if you want to consider yourself some kind of like movie buff or movie aficionado, whatever phrase you want to use, that seeing 2001: A Space Odyssey at least once is important towards having that title. So that's why it's on this list. You should check it out, even though I don't think it's that great, but it is important in that sense. So number 33 is 2001: A Space Odyssey. Number 34, though, is a movie I like a whole lot. It also came out in 1968 and was hugely influential, and that is the original Planet of the Apes. Now, since this movie came out in 1968, there's been 8 other Apes movies, which is crazy. So that this entire like big franchise came out of this. Now, this movie is based off of a book written by a French author, if I remember correctly. I don't know if there are other books or if the movie series just continued on and they wrote their own stuff. I don't know. But I think this movie is fantastic. I like it a lot. I've seen it multiple times. I have all of the Planet of the Apes movies on Blu-ray on my shelf. I even have the crappy Tim Burton one from 2001, even though it's so bad and not worth watching. Just because I'm a completionist, I like to have all of them in my collection. So I've watched it a couple times, and I just don't feel the need to ever watch that 2001 version again. But the one from 1968 with Charlton Heston and Roddy McDowall, who appears in every one of the original Apes movies. Oh my goodness, this movie is great. So the basic premise is these astronauts crash land on this planet where instead of humans being dominant, it's apes are the dominant species, and humans are kind of dumb and stupid, and they go around hunting humans. And there's a whole lot of philosophy going on in this movie, and a lot of just really good entertaining things. This movie has a lot of classic lines like "Get your hands off me, you damn dirty ape," and other things like that going on. I really recommend this movie. I like it a whole lot. Planet of the Apes is fantastic, from 1968. We'll move on to number 35, though. Number 35 is one of my favorite musicals that I've ever seen. Came out in 1969, and that is Hello, Dolly. Stars Barbara Streisand, and she plays Dolly. What's Dolly's last name? Doesn't matter. She plays Dolly, and she is a matchmaker and does a whole bunch of other things, and is trying to matchmake herself with this one guy, and is like setting up other people at the same time, and there's all these pieces of the puzzle moving that she's trying to maneuver and get everything to work out, and it's actually surprisingly intricate and emotional and heartfelt. If you've seen Wall-E, the Pixar movie Wall-E, like at the beginning of the movie where it's like, out there's a world outside of Yonkers, that song is from Hello Dolly. And so when Wall-E is watching like that old-timey movie and they're singing a song about love and Wall-E is learning how to hold hands, that's Hello Dolly that he's watching. So if you really like Wall-E and you have always been like, hey, what's that movie that he's watching? He's watching Hello Dolly. So you should go check out Hello Dolly, and then you'll know kind of what's going on, and you'll know the context of why those songs were used in Wall-E. And it all works out that way. It meshes together nicely. I'm going to move on, though. We're out of the 1960s, and we're moving into the 1970s. 1971. So when I said Hello Dolly is one of my favorite musicals of all time, I have to say that I think this is my favorite musical of all time from 1971 is Fiddler on the Roof. This movie is also very long, but oh my goodness. I firmly believe that the man, I cannot remember his name and I did not write it down, so I'm sorry. I have to quickly look it up. But I believe that the man who plays the father in Fiddler on the Roof is one of the most perfectly cast actors in a role of all time. He just fits that role so well. Topol is the actor's name, and he plays Tevye. It's been a while since I've watched Fiddler on the Roof, too. I need to rewatch this. This movie is just amazing. It's so good. The music is incredible. The dance sequences, everything from like what's happening in the world outside of their village to what's happening in the village, everything is so intricate and layered. This movie is 3 hours and 1 minute long, and I love every minute of it. Do you know that song, like, if I was a rich man, that's from Fiddler on the Roof. So if you know that song, or at least a little bit of it, you should check out Fiddler on the Roof. Or if you know, like, Matchmaker, Matchmaker, Make Me a Match. Oh my goodness, I sing that song all the time. It's so good. Check out Fiddler on the Roof from 1971. I recommend it very, very highly. I'll move on to number 37, though. Now, when I said this movie is a list of 100 movies, that's kind of a cheat, because it's not really. It's technically more than 100 movies, because I have, like, clustered, like, trilogies together as just one point to talk about, or, in this case, 2 movies that I've paired together on the list. So the next one, number 37 on the list, is The Godfather, parts 1 and 2, and the first one came out in 1972, so that's why it's slotted here on the list. So The Godfather is often regarded as one of the greatest films of all time. I absolutely love it. I think it's fantastic. And then The Godfather Part 2 is just as good, if not better, than the first one. Like, oh my goodness. Both of these movies are powerhouses of cinema. They're iconic, they're legendary. The performances from Marlon Brando in the first one, Al Pacino and Robert De Niro is in the second one, and oh my goodness, these movies just are hinged on the performances. The stories about these Italian Americans who like run the mafia. I love these movies. If you haven't seen them, check them out. At least if you don't like them, then you will have seen them. And don't worry about watching The Godfather Part 3, because it's not very good and not worth watching and not included on this list. So we'll just move on from The Godfathers 1 and 2. Number 38 is a movie that came out in 1973, directed by George Lucas, American Graffiti. Now, American Graffiti is an interesting movie in the way that it was made. Before this movie came out, George Lucas directed a film called THX 1138, which I also recommend, but it's not on this list. And this movie is on this list for a very specific reason, and it's the story that I'm about to tell you. So when THX 1138 came out, it was critically acclaimed. Critics really enjoyed it, but it's very much like an art house 2001 A Space Odyssey type movie where like the things that are happening are kind of out there, not everybody gets it. Luckily for me though, I do get THX 1138 and I like that movie a lot. I think it's really good. But the critics, when the movie came out, they said like this is great, but George Lucas doesn't have the ability to make something that can appeal to a mass audience. And George Lucas kind of scratched his head at the people saying this. He's like, well, like making something that appeals to a mass audience is super easy. Like I can do that no problem. And he made American Graffiti. And this movie is so entertaining. It's a coming of age story. It stars Ron Howard and the guy who's also in Jaws. Cannot remember his name. I'm talking about a lot of different actors and directors in movies here today, so if I don't remember everybody's name, I'm very sorry. But this movie, oh my goodness, it's so entertaining, and the things that happen, it's basically one last night in their small town before these two guys who just graduated high school go off to their city university or college or wherever they're going. And so George Lucas like made this movie and wrote it and like put it out in no time at all, and it was hugely popular, made a lot of money. And he basically made it just to prove a point that like, oh yeah, I can make something that appeals to a mass audience. It's super easy. And this is a movie that has emotion and it has depth to it. What's also interesting about this movie is he made it without a score. It has a soundtrack instead. So a lot of very famous songs from the 1960s are in this because it was made in the 70s, but it takes place in the 60s because when George Lucas was growing up, he was really into cars and like just cruising, as they called it, where you just get in your fancy car and you drive up and down Main Street all day. Like that's what you do. That's how you hang out with the kids, which is a really interesting way to hang out. In like your passengers would hop out from one car into another car, go hang out with some other kids who were driving around, and it's a fascinating lifestyle. And George Lucas was really into this kind of lifestyle, and he liked doing that a lot. He got into like a big car accident when he was younger, but that is not something I'm going to get into today because I don't want to talk about this for too long. So American Graffiti was number 38. Number 39 is one of those no-brainer movies, Jaws. It came out in 1975. This movie is an absolute classic. It's often regarded as the original blockbuster. And it also goes to show that like how powerful media can be and the power of a movie. Because after Jaws came out, like people didn't go out to beaches. And the beach industry, if that's a thing, or like tourism, I guess, in that respect, like they suffered for that summer and like the following summer after because people were freaked out by this movie and they're like, I don't want to go to the ocean because a shark is going to eat me and that's terrifying. And it's like cemented this idea in people's minds that sharks are aggressive and mean and they will eat you, which from what I understand is not really the case at all. And like if you leave a shark alone, it'll leave you alone unless it's really super hungry if you're bleeding or something. I don't know. But Jaws is a magnificent film. It also spawned a lot of sequels. There's a lot of different Jaws movies, but the first one is the only one that's worth watching. Directed by Steven Spielberg. I do believe this is the first time he appears on this list, and it's absolutely not the last time, because in my mind, Steven Spielberg is the greatest director of all time. He's my favorite. His movies are just amazing, and that's why he appears on this list multiple times. So, Jaws from 1975. We're on to number 40. Number 40 is a movie that my wife doesn't like at all when we watched it. She just wasn't about this movie. It also came out in 1975. It's called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Stars Jack Nicholson as a man who's in a insane asylum, and he's kind of crazy, and it's about how they're trying to escape, and the nurse that's taking care of them is evil. And that's it. That's what this movie's about. There's a bunch of different like fun characters who are all in the insane asylum. It's not a super happy movie. It's kind of tragic. some of the things that happens here, and the nurse is evil. So it's like, don't know what to say. It's a tragic, harsh movie, but important, and the performances are really good. It did win Best Picture the year that it came out, and you gotta watch it. It's one of those ones, like, I don't want to say any more than what I've already said. So check out One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest from 1975, starring Jack Nicholson. We'll move on to the next one here. This is also another one of those movies that just sparked a bunch of sequels. Also won Best Picture the year it came out, 1976, Rocky. I love the first Rocky movie. I'm not into the other ones as much. Rocky 4, when he fights communism, is kind of fun. I really, really like Creed. Didn't like Creed 2 very much. But this original Rocky, oh my goodness. And he's not even a super likable guy. You know, when Rocky is going around, he's talking about like how he's a bum and like nobody likes him. Like, there are reasons why people don't like him that much. He's very aggressive towards Adrian and kind of forces her to be in a relationship with him, and it is very awkward. It makes me feel uncomfortable in the scene where they're like in his house together and he's like taking his shirt off and like asking her like not to leave and asking her why she's scared, and it's kind of weird. This movie is important though in kind of the same sense that American Graffiti is important, and because Sylvester Stallone had nothing going for him at the time. Like, he sold his dog, he was like practically living on the street, he was very, very poor, and he came up with the idea for this script, and he wrote the script for Rocky, and he wanted to write it and direct it and star in it. It was directed by some other guy, but he did get to star in it, and he got paid a lot of money, and like the first thing that he did was buy his dog back from the person that he sold it, and it's the dog that's in the movie. So his dog that he has in the movie is Sylvester Stallone's actual dog at the time. Obviously that dog's long dead by now. This movie came out a long time ago. But it's just the story of a man who has a chance, like a once in a lifetime chance, and he takes it. It's really just an underdog story. Rocky from 1976. Number 42 is another like trilogy or multiple movies that I've put into one spot. George Lucas is back. Number 42 is the original Star Wars trilogy, and those are the only Star Wars movies that are on this list. Do you hear me? Are you out there? Just the original Star Wars trilogy. Episode 4 from 1977, Empire Strikes Back, 1980, Return of the Jedi, 1983. That's it. The other movies exist, but they're not as important as these movies here. Every now and then, a movie comes along that literally shifts and changes the way movies get made. And Star Wars from 1977 is one of those movies. It radically changed everything. It was one of the first movies to have the credits all at the end and didn't have any credits right off the bat. We just jumped right into the story. It revolutionized visual effects. There's so many things that we would not have if it weren't for these Star Wars movies. Digital editing, non-linear editing. Pixar would not exist without these Star Wars movies and George Lucas. Surround sound wouldn't exist without these movies and George Lucas. I don't think I even need to explain why these movies deserve to be on this list of must-watch movies of all time. It has one of the biggest plot twists in movie history. They were hugely popular, made so much money, and I'm just going to leave it at that. The original Star Wars trilogy is number 42 on the list. Number 43 on the list is another science fiction film. It's the first time that we have director Ridley Scott on the list. Also, not the last time that he appears. He's made some really good movies. And that one is from 1979. It's called Alien. It's a sci-fi horror of... You know what Alien's about. I don't have to tell you. The alien bursts out of the guy's chest. It grows really big, and Sigourney Weaver has to fight it. And that's what it is. It's a science fiction horror. It's kind of scary and kind of creepy, and I like it. You should watch it. And I don't like a lot of horror movies. There are not many horror movies on this list of 100 because I feel that they're just whatever. I don't like them that much. There's something about them. I feel like, not that I'm looking down on them, I just feel they're not really worth my time, you know? a horror movie has to be really good and really well praised critically for me to even consider watching it, let alone be interested or actually end up enjoying it. But Alien is on that list. Also, a movie that spawned a bunch of sequels, some which are really good, some which are complete trash. And then you have the crossover with the Predator franchise. And Predator is not on this list, but Alien is. So Alien from 1979 is number 43. We'll move on to number 44. Stanley Kubrick is back. From 1980, that is the movie The Shining. This is also the second time that Jack Nicholson appears on this list. He was in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and of course, he is the main character in The Shining. And this movie is kind of creepy and weird, and oh my goodness, just engaging. I find this movie to be really engaging. You have the little boy who has The Shining. His little finger like moves up and down. He's like, Rad Ram, Rad Ram. My wife is much better at making that voice than me. I can't do it very well, but she's super good at doing it. But it's about this family who's living in this hotel during the winter, and it's a seasonal hotel. So they're the only ones living here, and they're in complete isolation. So it's fitting for this time now. Watch The Shining while you're in isolation. But don't do what the people in this movie do, because the isolation kind of gets to them, gets to their heads, and things happen. And it's a horror movie. What more do I need to say? You should check out The Shining from 1980. I will move on. Number 45, we've got another trilogy here. I wouldn't say that these movies shifted the film industry, but I would say these movies are hugely influential and about as near perfect a trilogy as you can come to, and that is the Indiana Jones trilogy. Now, the first one came out in 1981, so that's what I'm talking about now. I actually don't know the years of the other ones off the top of my head, but I love these movies. Indiana Jones as a character, the stories as a whole, like these movies are just so close to being perfect. It's the teaming up of George Lucas as a writer and Steven Spielberg as a director, just working together to create the adventures genre, really. Punching Nazis in the face and finding the Ark of the Covenant, finding the Holy Grail, or finding some magical stones. Oh my goodness, these movies are phenomenal. I have hardly anything bad to say about the Indiana Jones trilogy. I have all the bad things to say about the fourth Indiana Jones movie, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I don't recommend it at all, ever. Don't watch it. It's not worth your time. But Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade are amazing. I think Last Crusade is my favorite of the three. It probably goes, Last Crusade, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then Temple of Doom, which I feel is maybe most people's order of that. If Temple of Doom is your favorite, let me know. I would love to know that. I'd also like to know why. Not that I'm saying Temple of Doom is a bad movie, but I think that numbers 3 and 1 are just a little bit better. So that's that. The Indiana Jones trilogy. I only have 5 more movies to talk about left in today's episode, and then we will wrap it up. Number 46 is from 1982, another Ridley Scott movie, Blade Runner. Now, even though I have said before on the show, I think that Blade Runner 2049 is a better movie, the original Blade Runner is very influential. It's got Harrison Ford once again. It kind of gave us this vision of the future that we hadn't really seen before in movies, like visually, just how things look and like this gritty, realistic feel and this kind of dour future. Like it's raining all the time and the story is very serious. Like this movie takes itself very seriously, and I take this movie seriously because I think it's great. Now, there are several versions of this movie. There's like the original cut and the director's cut and the final cut. The version that I own and the one that I watch is the final cut. I actually haven't even seen the other ones. I know that they exist and I know what happens in them, but the final cut is the one that I watch. I think it's the definitive version according to Ridley Scott. So that's the one that I would recommend for you guys to watch. And I think that it's either impossible or very, very hard to find the other versions of this movie anyway. So Blade Runner, the final cut, it's a great science fiction masterpiece. You should check it out. Number 47, we're back again with Steven Spielberg from 1982 as well, and this is E.T., the Extraterrestrial. I love this movie. The story of a young boy and a little alien finding each other and becoming friends, and they're teaching them English, and they're trying to hide it from their mom, and people are trying to find E.T. at the same time, and oh my goodness, there's all the feels going on in this movie. John Williams' score is beautiful. I shouldn't have to justify myself of why this movie is on this list. It's a pretty famous movie. People know all about it. It's referenced in pop culture all the time, so you should check out E.T. the Extraterrestrial. We've got 3 left. 3 more movies, and then that's it. Done for today. Number 48 is another very serious movie. Came out in 1982. It's called Gandhi. It stars Ben Kingsley as Gandhi. I do believe this movie won Best Picture, and Ben Kingsley won an Academy Award for his performance. And this is the story of Gandhi and how he led his people in a peaceful revolt against the colonizers, the British. And this is also, once again, a movie I haven't seen in a long time, but it's one of those movies that sticks with you. It's just so well crafted and so well made. You can't help but think about it and just kind of nod your head. I'm nodding my head right now. And you're like, yeah, that is a really good movie. I should rewatch it again. I wish I had the time in the day to rewatch all the movies that I want to watch. That would just be the most spectacular thing. Unfortunately, I don't have that kind of time, so I have to settle with just watching movies when I can. Even though currently I'm not working, I'm just at home all day, every day. But I find things to fill my time. I don't want to slip into just watch movies all day, every day, and cram 4 movies in. I don't want to do that. I feel like that's probably not very healthy for me. So, but if you guys want to watch a movie or 2 a day, go ahead and do it. Absolutely. You have my approval. I think it's okay. You should do that. I should do that. Before I get too far on a tangent on that, though, I'm going to move on to my last 2 movies here. Number 49 is from 1984. It's one of the only comedies on this list, and that's going to be the original Ghostbusters. Also spawned some sequels that I don't think are very good. Ghostbusters Afterlife is supposed to come out this year. Again, with the coronavirus, don't know what's going to happen. I did not like the all-female Ghostbusters. Chris Hemsworth was very funny. He has very good comedic timing, and he was about the only part of that movie that I found enjoyable. But the original Ghostbusters is so much fun and so unique in its concept, and actually kind of, I've used this word a lot in today's episode, but intricate, the story, the way Sigourney Weaver's character comes into play with the other characters, and how everything kind of had meaning and significance the whole time and kind of comes full circle at the end, even though they're fighting a giant marshmallow man. It's well thought out. This is a movie that they thought about, and the writing, I feel, is on point, and the comedy is very humorous. So Ghostbusters from 1984 is number 49 on my list. I have 1 left. It's also from 1984. Number 50 is going to be the original Terminator. Now, I feel like today's episode, more than any of the other episodes about this list, is the era of movies that spawned sequel after sequel after sequel. And Terminator is not exempt from this. Oh my goodness, there's so many Terminator sequels. There's Terminator 2, Judgment Day. There's Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. There's Terminator Salvation. There's Terminator Genisys. There's supposed to be another one soon. There's a TV show, the Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles. I'm sure there's more that I'm forgetting. There's so much Terminator stuff. But this original movie is really, really good. And not only is this movie really good, but this movie kind of came out of nowhere. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you a quick story about Terminator. This movie is directed by James Cameron, who is one of the most successful directors of all time. He directed the Titanic, which was the highest grossing film of all time for many, many years. And then he directed Avatar, which was also highest grossing film for many, many years. So this guy knows how to tell a story. But The Terminator was his first movie. And as I understand it, James Cameron was a truck driver. And he saw Star Wars in 1977, and he thought, well, like, I can do this. I can make a movie like that. And he came up with Terminator, and he wrote it and got Arnold Schwarzenegger, and they made it. Isn't that crazy? How you can just be like, well, I can make a movie, and then you do it, and it turns out to be great, and then you go on to become one of the most successful directors of all time just because you thought to yourself, hey, like, this is something that I can do. I can do this. And then you just go out and do it. I don't know if something like that is as attainable in today's film industry as it maybe was in the 1980s, but I wish. I wish I could be like, hey, this is something I can do. And I'm really wanting to use this isolation time to really work on myself as a writer and a content creator. And part of making this list and putting these episodes out and working on the podcast is helping me with that. At least I think so. But that's the story about Terminator that I wanted to share with you guys. And that's going to be it. That's number 26 to 50 on my ultimate must-watch movie list for movie buffs. I am very excited. We're halfway through the list, so we've got 2 more episodes coming out about this list here. So my question for you is, if you've been following along so far, how many of these movies, of these 50 movies that I've listed so far, how many of them have you seen? Do you plan on watching the ones that you haven't seen? I would love to know about that, so you can reach out to me. You can find me on social media, on Twitter at Pottle Nathan, and on Instagram at Movies Are Awesome Podcast. If you like the show, you can feel free to subscribe to it. You can find it on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and a whole bunch of other places, including now YouTube. I have found a home for the podcast on YouTube, so if you find that you want to check it out there, and maybe that's a better way to get the show for yourself, feel free to go check it out. I've got all of those links in the show notes below. You can check them out there. And before I close out, I just want to say thank you for listening to today's episode. Hopefully you found some movies that are good recommendations for you. I hope you check them out. Stay tuned for next week when I talk about movies numbered 51 to 75. And if you have nothing else to do, go watch more movies.